I just want to point out this is the UFC Apex, like we just said, which is a smaller octagon. Whether you're a Sun Tzu Art of War fan or you're just a degenerate gambler, right? The fighting surface matters, right?
Welcome to First Strike, only on VSiN, the sports betting network. Here's your hosts, Dave Ross and Rob Moreno.
And we are back. First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. Rob Moreno is going to join me a little bit later on in this program to break down what we're going to see in a pretty intriguing main event here with Steve Garcia, the Mean Machine, against David Onama. This week here on First Strike, MMA fans, you know him, you love him. Dan Tom is kind enough to join the program today. You can give him a follow on X at Dan Tom MMA. Does a great job. USA Today and MMA Junkie. Dan, always great to catch up with you, my man. Are there any other outlets that people can get your fine work, because you are a very hardworking man in this space?
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. I do the podcast over at Dogger Pass, Homo Fight, do some work and interviews there, and be a little apropos to our main event discussion here, but I work for MMA Junkie as well, and do regular breakdowns over there, but also, certain end of the year awards like Under the Radar Fighters, which one of two of the main event participants may or may not have been a recent recipient of.
Let's get right to it then, because I think this featherweight bout is very intriguing for many different reasons. And look, you come off a pay-per-view, and for us, people that are diehards that love this sport, we get just as jacked up for David Onama against Steve Garcia. But it's not going to be for the casuals that were maybe watching Cyril Gane and Tom Aspinall last week. But when you get to this, it does feel like two guys. Certainly Onama, that's a name that's certainly been on the rise, and then Steve Garcia, the Mean Machine, just the way he goes out there and has been able to dominate opponents and get them out. What's the key for Onama? Is it to avoid the pressure fighter that Steve Garcia could be and not make this kind of a close phone booth fight and have space to use what we think would be some naturally God-given advantages he might have athletically?
Yeah, that's a great setup there, and you're right. This is a real hardcore main event. I know people can be a little dour on the Apex fights, but I'm actually really glad they're giving guys like Onama and Garcia here featherweights that bring fireworks to the main event, and a great dynamic there as far as the pressure goes. But you use the word space, Dave. And I just want to point out this is the UFC Apex, like we just said, which is a smaller octagon. So, whether you're a Sun Tzu Art of War fan or you're just a degenerate gambler, right? The fighting surface matters, right? I got some Apex stats for you. Steve Garcia actually 5-0 inside that UFC Apex, Dave. He's 6-0 in that Apex if you count his Dana White Contender Series. Where on the other side, you got Onama is 3-1 in that UFC Apex, and he is 1-0 officially against UFC level southpaws. Okay, so the thing is he will be the more flexible fighter, to your point, to deal with pressure, right? But to your question, is he going to have that space? And I'm not sure, especially when Onama arguably does his best work off the front foot. And Dave, these are the toughest fights to break down, like back when a prime Tony Ferguson would fight another pressure fighter, you're like, okay, who's going to be the guy that doesn't move forward for once, and that's kind of tricky. Steve Garcia showed he had a different gear in his last fight against Calvin Kattar. And it's enough to get him the favorite spot here. But, man, I'm not sure how confident you can be on either side of this, if I'm being quite honest, Dave.
Yeah, and I do like that if you like the Garcia side with that smaller octagon at the Apex to put that pressure there. And that's why you don't see this very often, certainly with featherweights, where the total, as we talk on Wednesday, Dan, is sitting at 1.5 for a potential 5-round main event. You do not see this in featherweight fighting, and it's juiced only to $1.20 to the over 7.5 minutes. Look, Garcia doesn't want to get paid by the minute, right? He likes to go in there, get his work done. Onama maybe could go a little bit longer if you like that side. Do you think it's correlated that way, that if you look to Garcia, you look to an under, and the pressure that he has and the power that he has is just too much for Onama? Or if you like the smaller dog in Onama, he's able to extend Garcia. He's able to get him deeper into that late second round, potentially a third round and beyond.
It's a great dynamic. Absolutely. I would attach Garcia more to the under here. And even though, again, I don't feel like either fighter should be drastically favored, I think close to pick him is correct. I also would slightly favor Garcia, but those two things being said, I almost feel like the value here, we're bettors. We speak to a lot of bettors here, Dave. It feels like over or pass from a contrarian point of view because again, these guys, as many fighters do, they're expected to go to decision more the higher in competition. This is a very high stakes and important fight. So and the first time these guys are going 5 rounds, at least in the UFC, Garcia is the one fighter with 5 round experience prior, but that's way back in the regionals. So actually would expect a tentative first round. This also could be a low key. You're not going to get a great price on it, but I know a lot of people love to parlay those little cheeky fight starts round 2 legs,
Yes.
and that could be very much in play here. And if you like Onama and the plus money isn't that juicy for you, I say you play the hot rounds, and I think that's 2, 3, and 4 for the Onama side, under for the Garcia to Dave's point. But if you are looking at that Onama side, I say bet rounds 2, 3, and 4. Maybe fight to end round 2 if you're at a cheeky book. That round 2 is going to be the hot round. That's why it's set at 1.5.
Dan, I'm still scarred from my overplay last week in the main event with Cyril Gahn and Tom Aspinall, and I rebetted it a bunch of different times because Dan, that fight is going over 1.5 for the first time with Aspinall, and then boom, we
Yes,
get the Three
yes.
Stooges eye poke. So I'm a little scarred going back, but I do lean towards the over again in this main event at minus $1.20. Co-main event, you got Waldo Cortez Acosta as a small dog, and also in the fight previous, you got Jeremiah Wells as a small dog at plus $1.14 against Themba Garimba. Garimba's side here is $1.35. In those two fights here, potentially 3 rounds, and all these fights in the final 3 of the night, pretty closely aligned. Do you see any advantage plays here in 1, 2, or 3 of the final fights?
Yeah, I mean, those dog numbers are interesting, but the problem is kind of like the dog number I put on, that main event, right? At least for my taste, I don't know if it's juicy enough to be like, even if it's a dog or pass spot, we're like, oh, that dog is super sexy, so to speak, right? Like Waldo Cortez Acosta is not a very reliable guy. He's not. I'm definitely not a fan of his, but you got to put that stuff aside when it comes to betting. And if we're being honest, yeah, it's probably a dogger's pass spot. That being said, back to the fighting terrain. Even though Cortez Acosta 4-1 in that octagon, 5-1 counting contender series, a smaller octagon. I actually believe the smaller octagon favors a guy like Ante Dalia, who's going to be big. He loves that cage pushing style, so it actually probably favors win condition. So that fight feels like kind of a trap to me. Uh, Garimbo and Wells, again, I actually like the dog in that spot, Jeremiah Wells, but is he that big of a dog? No, but he has the more experience, the more upside. And as we've seen, some of these older fighters, like we saw with Mizuki Inoue, maybe not a 1-for-1 comparison, but you could argue that layoffs can be bad, but for older fighters, they could be good, and they come back really reset, and it feels like a Wells or pass spot for that Garimbo fight to me.
For the D'Elia fight against Salsa Boy, I think of Cortez Acosta as being one of those kind of like Onama, where you can be very athletic for your weight class, whether it's featherweight. This case is heavyweight. You don't think about those athletic heavyweights. Cyril Gahn, obviously, maybe the most athletic heavyweight we have here. But D'Elia, you think the pressure and the smaller cage at Apex, he can negate some of that athleticism from Salsa Boy, pressure him into the cage, and that's where he can find the advantages?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not the most exciting fight, that heavyweight cage pushing style, but D'Elia, he can box and put guys away along the fence, or he can take them down. And we've seen fighters before, right? Especially when they're not as experienced, even though Cortez Acosta has been pretty active since he's joined the UFC in 2023. That being said, Dave, how many times have we seen fighters, especially the athletic ones, start off strong, but they're trying to guess, is it striking? Is it grappling? They're having to grapple against the cage. The next thing you know, they're tired, and you're in a competitive fight, and the line is all of a sudden not what it was promised to be when it started, right? So
Yeah. I see it the same way. I read it the same way. I normally don't go this far down, Dan, on an Apex card, right?
sure,
I'm a
sure.
little surprised that Norma Dumont and Ketlin Vieira are this early. Like, to me, this could be a fight. Maybe it's just us because we're geeks and we
Yeah.
love this stuff, and we're like, this should be higher up on the card for Dumont against Vieira. And the money's starting to get a little bit out of hand here. Norma's up to about $1.70, $1.75 betting favorite. Earlier in the week,
Wow.
she was about $1.20, 25. Do you think she should be that big a favorite? Is the juice, I guess, going in the right way? Because I would have liked the fight earlier in the week. I wonder if it's been outpriced for me on the Dumont side.
I was having that exact same thought. Minus 150 or below is playable chalk for me. And I did have Dumont slightly favored, but I was hoping we'd get her at dog odds. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I did not expect, her to be that much of a favorite with or without the public push, but she is 6-0 inside that UFC smaller octagon. They both have headline in there, as you know, Dave. And it's interesting because Vera, she's technically 4-2, right? But she could be 6-0. You know, one of those losses was that a really controversial split to Yana Santos, where she pretty much out grapples her for like 13 minutes, but loses some striking at the end of 2 rounds. And then she has that close fight, another close fight, which I actually thought she lost. It was a split to Raquel Pennington. But again, these are very tight fights. She could also easily be 6-0. She comes from that Nova Uniao camp. So I would get the arguments for Vieta, but also, we've seen her be underperforming as of late. And I think that's what the market's speaking to, Dave.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see where that fight aligns. And you're right, with Dumont, you can understand the steam in the smaller octagon. And we keep talking about that. If you're new to MMA betting, that is a significant difference when you fight these Apex cards. If you're trying to grapple and or get close to your opponent, smother them in the athleticism, that's where you can take advantage of that. Dan, when you look down the card a little bit, any dogs that really jump off the page to you here on a Wednesday? I'm looking at some guys out there. I wonder if a Cody Durden is live. Normally, Cedricus Dumas is a big underdog. We can understand why here. Is there any dogs that might garner your interest here on Wednesday?
As far as dogs, I feel like Chang Ho Lee, again, not a big dog here, but this is one of those cases where you have someone open as the favorite and they flip to a dog. We saw it with Orichi Long. We saw another one cast just like Orichi Long last week. That's not coming to mind, Dave. But the point is, never be afraid to fade the market, A. And B, if you're a value boy, you really don't need to owe anybody an argument when you go to the counter and you bet a dog that was opened as the favorite, right? If we want to be reductive about it. But
Yeah.
but that's going to be a fun fight. Chang Ho Lee's going to be a live dog. And I also think, even though I'll probably officially pick Korea there with Ko, I do feel like it's dog or pass with Rowe in that fight.
Okay. Dan, love the content as always. Really enjoy following you on X as well. Dan Tom MMA. I think your expertise that you give out there, the knowledge you bring, before you make any wagers, people, be sure to check out Dan's stuff. And again, Dan, tell the people again where they can access you daily here, not just on X.
Oh, appreciate that. Easiest way at Damn Tom MMA. That not only is that the X handle, that's the handle for all socials. My free Substack where I'll have all these Apex and Southpaw stats posted for you guys for free. And that's the information at least I try to bring to the table, and I appreciate that, Dave. You're the man. I can speak to that in person and online, sir.
Yeah, anytime. I miss our dinners. We'll have another one, I'm sure, soon once we rendezvous back in Vegas. There he is, everybody. Dan Tom. Give him a follow on X at Dan Tom MMA. We are back with El Modelo, Rob Moreno. Let's see what the projections are. That's next right here on First Strike.
You're tuned in to First Strike, right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
We are back. First Strike here on VSiN. Dave Ross and Rob Moreno here with you on this Wednesday. Great conversation with Dan Tom in the last segment, Rob. And before we get to your model projections here, we just want to make sure everybody is aware. If you're not a VSiN Pro subscriber as of yet, Rob puts out his selections once he runs them through the model each and every week, right? I'm going to give you my best bets that I have, and those could come later in the week as well. So you need to be a VSiN Pro subscriber as little as $9.99 for your very first month. So you're going to get best bet access, betting splits, which I think are really important no matter what sport you are betting, sharp content that you need to read each and every day, VSiN.com/subscribe. Rob, when do you officially put in those plays for VSiN Pro subscriber once the model is done with the computations for the week?
So the model is ran on Mondays traditionally, maybe tweaked a little bit on Tuesdays, just to have everything ready for Wednesday for the recording. And so we have everything. But officially, I may have placed a couple bets maybe by now, but officially all the plays will go up on Fridays on VSiN. Gives us time to just see numbers move if we're waiting on things, let you make some official plays, let our guest also make official plays, and just gives it time. And that way it's also fresh on the website. When you go to the picks page, it's not buried under a week's worth of picks. Because let's face it, we got some bettors at the network, and sometimes our UFC stuff gets hidden among the
That's right.
numerous bets placed. So it's nice to find them right near the top on a Friday, Saturday morning.
Yeah, I played a couple totals last week in the 2 title fights, came up snake eyes on, the Mackenzie Dern fight. She was dominant. It was I thought
Yeah.
she clearly won that fight, impressed with her win, but I did play the under that 4.5, which was an official play, didn't come through. But man, as I alluded to with Dan, it was a big the big play that we talked about last week right here in the program, at the time was play that over on Tom Aspinall in the athleticism of Cyril Gahn. All of that we had that nailed perfectly, and then the Three Stooges eye
Boink.
poke, and fight gets canceled. It's a no contest, and we can't cash that ticket. The reason I bring that up, Rob, is when you look at these fights that we talked about with Dan in the Apex, unlike what we saw in Riyadh season over there in Abu Dhabi, you don't have the luxury if you're a mobile guy like a Cyril Gahn is at heavyweight, like Salsa Boy is in Waldo Ocasio Cortez, to use that athleticism in those smaller octagons. How do you factor that in when you start to break down some of these fights at the Apex?
I think it does make me wonder if fighters prepare for that as well. If it's at their advantage or disadvantage on their fighting style, especially like you said, a guy who likes to control the cage, who likes to control their opponent up against the cage. There's
Yes.
just more opportunity for that to happen in the cage. And some of these guys' numbers, it's definitely something for me to actually. You're making my mind think, but peel the onion back on some of these fighters who have maybe primarily fought in the Apex because some of these younger fighters, I mean, they debuted since 2020. They've probably had a lot of more Apex time than fighters who've been around prior to the Apex existing. And it'd be interesting to see what their stats look like compared to similar style fighters who just fight in the bigger cage on other schedules and other events.
And again, that's what we're getting at when we start to break down. Certainly, grapplers love the Apex style, like a Norma Dumont against Ketlin Vieira, a fight that we talked a little bit about. I know that the model has a projection there. Norma has now ballooned, as we talked about with Dan, up to $1.75. I think you got a better number before this thing started to get out of whack, which is very astute observation on your end, sir. What are the models showing you there? Which could be I'm so surprised where this fight is on a deep Apex card.
Yes, and I always try to watch my tongue because sometimes I'll say, "Man, I can't believe this fight's down on the." Like I think it was the Tatiana Suarez fight that was buried in the
Yeah.
prelims, and we were like, "How is this the prelims? This should be a co-main." And then we saw the fight, and we're like, "Okay, that's right where it belongs." So, but yes, this is another one that you would assume, at least for an Apex event, deserves a main card slot. But here we are, Vieira versus Dumont. Yeah, the number has been moving. Monday she was around -140. Yesterday -165. She now finds herself around -175. So one of the reasons why I enjoy running the model on Mondays is if I start seeing those movements
Yeah.
throughout the week, and I might take a peek on the weekend to see where numbers are. But especially come Monday, it's like if I have a feeling this is only going to continue to balloon, I'll just go ahead and pull the trigger. Now, if I was on the wrong side of it, it is what it is. The bet is in. I'm still backing it. But currently, now Dumont is coming off some time off. She last fought September of 2024, but she's got a 5-fight win streak. So
Yep.
you would assume that momentum is still living there. Vieira's coming off that win versus Macy Shazan, but she did miss weight in that last fight, which
Yep.
was at a higher weight class, by the way. So interesting that she missed weight there. But overall, she's 9-4 in the UFC. So she's been in the cage with some elite talent, though.
Yeah.
Caitlin Vieira shared the cage with Holly Holm, Misha Tate, Kayla Harrison, and
Hall of Famer.
say what you will, Raquel Pennington, former champion as well.
Yep.
Like she reached the mountaintop. So Vieira shared the cage with them. I will say Tate and Holm definitely post the peak of their powers, but still it creates a veteran out of you. Now with that comes the concern in her XR percentage though, because Vieira's down at 52%. She's
Wow.
tilting towards that red flag. Dumont still holds a 70%, which you're going to build that on a win streak, on a good win streak. Um, and the striking leans towards Dumont as well. You talked about that cage control, but her striking hits there too. She lands 3.86 significant strikes per minute with a 1.70 differential. So she's hard to hit. Now that could be different in a smaller cage, but she only absorbs 2.16 significant strikes per minute. That's great, especially with Vieira, who doesn't have as much output. She only lands 2.84 significant strikes per minute with a negative differential. So if they're in a trade exchange, Vieira's going to get more damage than she's probably bargaining for. Now, in that grappling, they both actually hover around 60% control rate in clinch and ground control. Dumont has a slightly higher takedown accuracy, 57%. But let me tell you, Caitlin Vieira's takedown defense is elite. 90% takedown defense, and
Wow.
the numbers are high. It's not like someone's only shot twice on her.
Right.
She's faced takedown attempts. Dumont's still at 72%, so that's respectable, but it's possible we see a striking match here, and it's going to be experience and durability. See who lasts essentially the longest. Neither one has super power when it comes to those strikes, so it may just be a technical standing fight. And with that said, the model does see it towards Norma Dumont. We talked about that number. It gives her about a 73% win probability, and her odds currently give you about a 63% win probability, so I was happy to grab it at -160 yesterday, but it is -175 today. It's a smaller card for me, so I probably would still bite it, just for the sake of having something to root for, but that's where we sit right now.
By the way, I'm so glad you broke it down like that, Rob, because I'm sure a lot of people out there that might be watching or listening to us for the first time, they don't understand how the model is still finding value in the number. Even though it's gone up, the win percentage is dictating that there's still value in that $1.75. Now, that could get extracted if that gets to $2. That could change the model as the week goes, but
Absolutely.
right now, it's still showing you there. And by the way, that total, how about this? Over 2.5? 445. You gotta lay $445 to win 100. If you think there's finishing potential, which the model doesn't show, plus 310 right now in that fight.
And
Speaking of
that's always
ladies,
it's sorry, just to speak
yeah,
on the rounds, that's always a sneaky way to know what the book thinks about
totally.
finishing potential is when it's heavily juiced that way. Not saying it's impossible, obviously, things happen, but it just shows, if you can't do the research yourself, just looking at numbers can sometimes tell you what the people who have done the research see.
Absolutely. That you can always I do that. You know me, I'm like Mr. Totals these days. I always look at those
Yeah.
first now before I really even
You
look.
almost had a big one last week. I'm
Ah,
giving it to you. I'm giving it to you.
right before that fight, look back in the strawweight division, Montserrat Ruiz, she looks so small in the octagon with every woman that she's been in there yet. And that's why I think she's, again, when you look at the eye test, she's a massive underdog here against at least Ardalian. Ardalian right now is -375. The comeback here in Ruiz is plus 295. And again, look at the total 2.5, not just as heavily as it is in the Vieira Dumont fight, but still minus 280. Is the model showing any possibility that if it hits the cards, I normally don't want to be on a $4 betting favorite and sweat that out if the implication is it's going to go all 15 minutes.
So this is one of those fights that I'm waiting to pull the trigger because I'm trying to see how to bet this fight. Um, Ruiz, she's got the look of a fighter. She's got tattoos everywhere,
Right.
but man, she has not shown it in the UFC at least. She debuted back in 2021 and she's lost 3 straight fights. By knockout, all by knockout. And she's had now a 2-year layoff to add on top of that.
Oh, boy.
She last fought November 2023, so 10-4 overall professional record. Now, Ardaline, she's making her model debut, so this is her 4th fight in the UFC. Also, not overly impressive. She's 1-2 in the UFC, so it's nothing I can really raise her flag and say this is why she should be such a big favorite. I think this is one of those situations where it's who's really bad at something and someone's just okay at it. Um, XR percentage here. Ardalian 69%. So even though she's 1-2 in the UFC, she's actually maintained a pretty high XR percentage. She had a split decision loss, a unanimous decision loss, and a unanimous decision win. So we have seen the full cage time we need from her. And so 69% is pretty impressive. Ruiz, 3 knockouts to her credit, loss. 22% XR percentage. That is
Eesh.
probably the lowest I've seen at probably this year. I don't know if ever. And that's highly alarming because it means even she has made it out of the first round before. I'm not trashing her like that,
Right.
but that means she's losing even the rounds she survives. She doesn't, and there's a reason. The numbers back it all up. Ardaline, 6.72 significant strikes landed per minute. So the output is coming heavy. Negative 1.69 differential, so she does absorb a lot. She absorbs 5 significant strikes per minute, but here's why that's not a concern for me. Ruiz only lands 0.79 significant strikes per minute. I see you laughing there. That is less than 1 strike a minute. So even if she landed you're talking about she lands a strike, like 5 strikes per round, and she has a negative 4.16 differential.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
she's just standing there getting pieced
Absorbing
up.
shots.
absorbing shots nonstop, and that's not a good recipe against someone who has the output. Now, grappling, sure, she does have some grappling experience. She has 83% takedown accuracy, 5 takedowns in those 4 fights, but it's only 47% control, so she's not doing anything with it either. Ardeline, only 3 takedowns, but only 3 UFC fights, 91% control. So she does know how to control the cage if they do a grappling exchange, and she has 88% takedown defense herself. So I think Ruiz needs a takedown to survive, but I'm not sure she can even attach anything to the takedown if she gets it. And it's all Ardeline in the model. It's a small sample size for both fighters,
Yep.
but the model gives her a 91% win probability.
She will be in parlay pieces for yours truly. There's no doubt about that. No disrespect to Montserrat, but every time I watch her fight, I go, I don't know that she's a UFC caliber fighter. Look, and maybe she's going to
Right.
show differently here, but I'm with you. I'm with the model on that one. I think that's a strong play. If you want to build a parlay, I'm going to look to the Ardeline side. Very quickly, main event. I got to ask you about that. I will be on the over 1.5, even though I'm still tainted from last week. Still gone. Thought we were going to get there. But I do think that I like Steve Garcia. I like the side. I'll probably end up getting there as well. But the respect that I have for Onama and that athleticism, that he can maybe keep some distance early on, try to keep this clean technical as much as Onama can early. But I think eventually the pressure of Steve Garcia will get there. But I do think it's going to take a little bit longer than 7.5 minutes. What's the model showing you?
The model shows it's close, and the odds show that it's close, right? They have very similar XR percentages, both 60% up. Their striking is actually very similar. You're talking about 2 guys who are the huge difference is Garcia's hard to hit. That'll be the difference. They both have high output, 4 significant plus strikes landed per minute, but Garcia only absorbs 1.95, and that's great for someone who's landing above 4 significant strikes per minute, because usually it's a crazy exchange, right? That
Right.
you're landing these strikes, like Ardeline's numbers, right? She's still absorbing 5. He's only absorbing 1.95. So Onama absorbs 4.73, so it's huge. Now, Onama has 4 knockdowns in the UFC. Garcia's been knocked down um, 7 times, I believe.
Mm,
I'll have to let me double check that real quick.
sure.
He's been knocked down 5 times. I apologize. But that's a concern, right?
Yeah,
Because if
alarming.
Onama can land the punch, he's on the floor. Now, he does have a great win streak going, Garcia, so he's not exactly someone who's been knocked out a bunch of times. He's only been knocked out once. But so to your point, I think it's something they're both going to be careful of each other's powers, and it's a reason to be cautious in that first round, head into the second round. It's crazy for a 5-round fight to have a 1.5 total, especially at this weight class, but the model does go Steve Garcia's way. It likes everything it sees. And once again, a reason for me to look at the numbers on Monday. I mean, I grabbed him at -125. Actually, he was -130 Monday. I grabbed him yesterday, -125. Today, he's -135. Model gives him 75% win probability. I like the number at -125, and what is a smaller number for a main event we've seen in a couple weeks,
Yeah,
to be
man,
honest, for the favorite.
absolutely. We normally don't see this. And even in the main card, as we talked about with Dan, you look at those last 3 fights, they're all pretty closely aligned here. So I understand it, but I'm with you. I'm on the Steve Garcia side here, as much respect. And as many times I've bet David Onama as a big dog, I don't know that the pressure fighter that Steve Garcia can be, the mean machine, if it's going to be enough. But I just think it'll take longer to do that. But I think eventually he will wear down David Onama and get this job done. If you have not liked, subscribed, follow the show here, First Strike. Rob, really appreciate all your work you do each and every week to get those great guests like Dan Tom that we had at the beginning of the show. So let's cash some more tickets, my man, and we'll do this again next week.
Absolutely, man. Thank you to Dan. Thank you to you, the always professional Dave Ross.
There it is, everybody. He is El Modelo, Rob Moreno, right here on First Strike. And with that, we'll see you next week. Cash some tickets. Enjoy the fights, and we'll see you next Wednesday.